Welcome back to The Lasting Mission. Today, we return for the second installment of our two-part series featuring retired Lieutenant General Walt Piatt, CEO of the 501c3 veteran service organization Wounded Warrior Project. If you haven't listened to part one, we encourage you to begin with that impactful introduction. Now, here's Mission Roll Call CEO Jim Whaley.
I commanded organizations, pretty big ones in combat zone, but when I came home, I was always reminded that I was Walt and I was Dad. And, take out the garbage. You may have commanded big organizations and you may have snapped your fingers and people may have done something, but here you're a member.
Your job.
Yeah, here you're a member of a unit and a small family that needs each other. And my wife gave me the best advice that I ever had in my time in service was, she said, Walt, don't deploy until you deploy. And I realized in my back-to-back deployments after 9/11, throughout the first 10 years of the war, I always knew when I was going again. Every day I got back, I knew the date I was going. And I remember I was always thinking about what I did wrong on the previous deployment, what I was going to have to do on the next deployment. I was never really home
in the moment
with the people that loved me the most. And thank God I had that support. And thank God I listened. And it wasn't always easy. I can't ever say that, but I would say without the love and support of my family, I would never have gone and been as successful or stayed in the military as long as I did. I wouldn't have done it. So we know the core to that family, or that wellness being, is that family. We've got to strengthen family. So all are welcome in our organization. Family support members, they served too. And they've served with such great value, and they need the help in bringing them home and helping them reintegrate and rebuild their family around love and care, and not about trauma of war and conflict.
Yeah, well, Cynthia's a remarkable woman. I know her, and she's just a fabulous individual and empathetic and smart and caring and all those things that you need to be in order to do the things that she's been able to do. When you think about everything that's going on, that you guys are working on, and the effects that we still as a nation have from 20 plus years of conflict, and in this time and space right now, with a new secretary of the VA and some work being done on bills, Access Act, you don't have to go into any specifics, but in your mind, Walt, what are some of the important advocacy efforts that you have underway with Jose and others on your team that are working at? I know we work with them, but maybe you can share with the audience what those important items are and what impact that has not only on veterans but their families.
Yeah, it's one of the great programs we do is our advocacy in Washington, because I tell you that veterans are still well respected in our country, regardless of which side of the aisle. It's not political. I always remind people that we are the foundation of our very freedom. So if you love America, you got to love warriors and veterans who defended this country. Right. We're not political.
You have one without the other.
Yeah, and we have access to both sides of the aisle, to the VA. We have great relationships because it's easy to beat up the VA, and this is not a political statement, but it's so big and it's very difficult. But the problems the VA faces, they all started in uniform somewhere. It was a service member. So if we can help with the transition and help with that, we can provide a more productive member of society, not a veteran. Veterans should never be seen as a threat to society, and they should never be seen as a burden to society. They should be leaders of society, and that's what I think we're all in that effort together. Regardless of where your politics may stand in Washington, everybody in Washington wants to help the veteran, come back home. So we're very excited about our advocacy ones, and we get to testify every year. We get to submit our legislative priorities. We get to advocate and lobby for some of those. But the most important thing I think we do is we introduce members and the staff members to actual warriors who are experiencing this. So when we go to the Hill, we call a warrior fly-in. When I was just there in March, we had testimony in February, but then we went back the next week in March. We flew in 100 warriors, almost every different state, territories as well. And we talked about the issues that they were facing, financial wellness. How can we improve financial wellness and improve transitions, and what the acts go with that, like the Major Richard Starr Act, so we can get everyone the entitlements they need. And it wasn't like we were lobbying, we want the Richard Starr Act. No, we were introducing into a warrior that was actually impacted, like someone who lost both their legs, was medically retired, but can't take retirement or the VA benefits, has to decide which one they're going to take. They should not be penalized for a wound or injury in combat that ended their career. Right. But also with brain and mental health and getting access to our veterans, whether it be community access care or access into the VA, get that access immediate and find out where the most immediate care is, so people aren't waiting. If you're having problems and you're contemplating suicide, you can't wait 40 days for an appointment. You've got to have access.
And it astounds me, the organizations that are against access.
Yeah, I think everybody, I think generally, like, everybody wants to create efficiencies and good access, but sometimes we set up systems that become so difficult that it looks like you're blocking it. And I think what I made promises to both the majority leader of the House and Senate and the minority leaders is that we would respond with facts from warriors where the impact is hitting. Mm-hmm. The Secretary of the VA, the previous one and the current one, both thanked us and said, thank you for your feedback. We want to hear from you because we don't want to let veterans down. Now, it's easy to, who doesn't want to build efficiency in government? Everybody wants to do that. It's just hard to do. I don't know how to do it, but I know how to communicate correctly to members of what may or may not, what's going to help and advocate better for what's going to help a warrior. And what we do is we also help write the bills with the staff. We tell them exactly what it should be. We give them access to the team. And then we have a team of in Washington, D.C. that specialize in this. We constantly keeping them informed. We also building this grassroots level initiative out called Warrior Advocate Leaders, to put a warrior who's a volunteer back in every congressional district, but also in state districts and state capitals, so that members can pull from a constituent from their district and say, hey, Jim, what's the veteran position on this? And this warrior advocate leader will have all the legislative priorities and what we're working on and what's going to best help leaders and what's not. We've had this happen, and we're not there yet, but our vision is we will have this in every state, at every state capital, because governors and state assemblies need to have veterans issues just as well as our federal government. But to have a veteran or a warrior they can call, they can give them facts from their district, it's very powerful. And we've been able to show them where a particular bill may hurt a veteran, and they pulled back and rewrote the language before they passed it. So it's effective, but you got to work with the system. It is our system. I fought to defend our system. I respect it. But I think we're better advocates when we bring the voices to the lawmakers and let them see firsthand. And we don't want to criticize people in the media. We want to talk to them face to face and say, here's what we can do to best help warriors. And I find everybody in Washington, D.C. and across the United States wants to help the men and women to help keep this country free.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes it's just a lack of the knowledge of what those hurdles are at the elected positions, right? That a new congressman or maybe a seasoned senator, but, they're only getting a piece of the news or a little bit. So that's why here at Mission Roll Call, we do polling across the country and share that with elected officials and the media to help bring awareness to it and amplify the voice of veterans. We think about the VA, and you're right. I mean, it's easy to take a shot at the VA and find everything wrong with them. But boy, I'll tell you, the VA here where I go, they're great people. And I know that's across that whole organization. There's people that have devoted their lives to serving veterans in that organization. But there's a bureaucracy. Sometimes it's difficult to get things through the system, and change is difficult. And sometimes people are going to be automatically against that change. But we find that sharing that polling information, much like you're doing with your advocates, is very important to elected officials to get a sense, to have a finger on the pulse of their constituents, of what it really does take, what are the hurdles, what are the challenges that families are facing and veterans are facing getting the care they need or the services that they need. You talked about a little bit, Walt, and maybe you can expand upon it. And there's a critical time, as you know, when you leave the service, that transition period, and then you're out of the military and you go back to your small town in Pennsylvania or here in South Carolina. and you're in a different world now. You've left the world that you've known for maybe 4 years or maybe for 42 years, and you're trying to adapt. And sometimes that transition program doesn't really kind of help with that. I think the Army, the military, all the branches of service do a wonderful job inculcating a group of people, bringing them together, giving them an ethos, a shared vision, and they're part of a unit. But when you leave the military, that same process really doesn't happen. You go through a program and then you're out. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing in your seat of the gaps in the transition program, transition process rather, that you're trying to fill, or things that our listeners need to know about to try to avoid, or maybe we work together to try to solve.
Yeah, I think transition can't be, a classroom setting where we just tell you how to transition.
Right.
Because the reality is nobody's listening. They just want to get out of there, and, give them the numbers. They'll call later. But the young person is transitioning from the military. Most of it's for good reasons. They just have big dreams. Like, right. I wanted to go to college, I wanted to, and I transitioned out. It was not easy back then, but because I didn't listen to anything they told me to do. And it's also not easy to just say that's the military services have to do this better. Because what organization will invest time, energy, and revenue
to make it easy
into having people depart? The military is about bringing, they're probably bringing people in and keeping them in. They want them to stay, and that's their job. We want them to do that because when they do it really well. I think we have to look at this a little differently. And I've told the military secretaries and the chiefs and their staffs that we should, and not we, I say collectively, the Veteran Support Organization community, we should all help more with transitions beyond just what we're doing right now with Warrior Transition Ready and TAPS, because those are kind of the classroom, segments. Those are all very important, but we're actually doing programs right now with active duty members. This started out of a request in Alaska because Army was having a high suicide rate. I was still on active duty when this was happening, and we just had an introduction through the Chaplain Corps to Wounded Warrior Project that we could actually run a Project Odyssey for active duty members. Doesn't matter if you're transitioning or not. You could be a new member only a year in, and we're teaching you teamwork, mental resiliency, bonding, mental toughness, resiliency, all the things warriors want to learn. And then they start to realize, oh, there are people who do get out of the military, and there's still life out there, and there's still life inside the military. We're not trying to persuade them to get in or get out, but I think we have to do more for active duty members. We're running a lot more programs now in Colorado. We did one recently in Fort Bragg. We're trying to expose active duty members, and wherever they come, whether it's a fitness expo or it's a Project Odyssey, we register them for Wounded Warrior Project. Hey, you're part of the family now. If you decide to transition or not, we're here to help you in your future military service. So I think we have to lean in and I think help our country, because you're listening to what the military is going through. They've got to make cuts. They have increased demands on their mission and less resources coming in. I think that's going to always be the case.
Yeah, we can't expect them to do this whole thing. It's really
I think we can, because my argument, and the VA they're very interested in this, like making some things mandatory before you get out. Don't get out and then find the VA. It should be, you should have to opt out in order not to be a member of the VA before you get out of the military.
And maybe you need to opt out for not, for learning about some of the VSOs out there that can help you.
Yes.
There's 200,000 young people and getting out of the military every year, and everyone is doing their own journey. And I get that, but I don't know about you, Walt. I've had smart guys and gals that are getting out of the military, and I talk to them. They call me. They probably call you about, hey, I'm going to transition out and I'm trying to look for my next position. And that's great. Happy to help. When are you getting out? Oh, next month.
Yeah, I think, and it does happen. And too often their own personal identity is the uniform. And that's one of the challenges. And I've cautioned people in the military, if your career is any higher than number 4 in your priorities in life, you're probably off a little bit. And I don't know what your top 3 would be, but it could be your family, your health, your religion, your education. But if your career pops into one of those top three, those other will suffer, and those are more important than your
Right.
career. And so a lot of it is just learning how to be, a good person, and learning how to be self-aware, and recognizing that I served, but it's not who I was, it's what I did. And it helps with the transition. So you realize you have a lot more to give. Your
Yeah.
purpose was not the rank on your uniform. Your purpose is what's inside your heart and your mind.
Yeah.
And you can give back so much because you've done so much. You don't even know how much you've done and how much that is needed to help others along their journey. With me, I always longed to just get back. I loved the fall in Lock Haven, the beautiful
Oh, it's
Susquehanna.
beautiful.
It was like,
Susquehanna
yeah,
is gorgeous.
it was like a painting. And I remember my last fall, my senior year, I remember writing about it saying, I'll never see this beauty again. This may be my very last time. And throughout my career, I always thought back to, the quiet woods of Pennsylvania where I grew up. I think we all have that memory, wherever that hometown was.
Yeah.
And when I did finally, 42 years later, finally retire, I had to move to upstate New York where my daughter was. Very different set of circumstance. But I remember thinking on my drive there that, these trees and everything grew without me. Perhaps they didn't need me, but perhaps in some small way because of me, this place stayed where it was. And I found great satisfaction in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you didn't save the world. You didn't necessarily, but you made things better by making your own life better, your own family better. And then we had a horrible winter storm up there, and I was shoveling 4 feet of snow for 6 days in a row. So very humbling. I realized I was back to the lowest ranking person in the family again. And I remember driving to the gasoline store tomorrow, the convenience store in the morning, get a cup of coffee, with a scruffy beard and a hat, and, ready shoveling snow. I had to put a roof on my daughter's house that was leaking. I was protecting the apartments that had young lieutenants renting in, and I'm up there fixing the leaks. And I kept thinking, it's just good to just be, no one, and just be here, be someone of just that can do things with
just disconnect from.
Yeah.
So
it is a tough journey, but I think it doesn't have, my point is, it doesn't have to be that hard. It just,
right.
Connection is key.
Yeah.
Connection with people you understand, people you love, finding that purpose. For me, it was fixing a roof because it was going to leak and we were going to, the tenant was getting wet. It was necessary. It was now. I didn't choose it, but everybody has that purpose. But it can't be, hey, it's going to find me. I'm just going to sit back and let things come to me, because it won't. You got to get connected in that community. It's human nature to want to connect with one another. It's even more so for a veteran who has been pulled outside of humanity to some degree to reestablish that connection, because they don't feel worthy. Right. And when you do connect it, puts them on that path that so many of them need. And that really is the transition, that you are special, you're important, you have a lot of value to add, and there is hope and a renewed purpose. You just got to find what it is. And we got to give you the options and the patience and the time to figure out what that purpose is. Like I give you an example, many warriors I've met. One, he had dreams of playing in the NFL, but after 9/11, he joined, like many people did, to serve his country. And then he wakes up at Walter Reed and he's got to make a decision to take his leg off or not. Now, that's not a position, a 22-year-old male thinks he's going to be in, that has aspirations. And so he found different jobs and programs, but this organization helped him start his own business. He's very successful now, but he found his purpose. And to me, they find their higher purpose, but he didn't set out to lose a leg in war and then be a small business owner. He wanted other dreams, but when they said too often they have to accept the life they thought they were going to have in order to embrace the one now they didn't think was possible. We, along with other VSOs, we have to help them with that. That's the real transition. It's not about just getting out, finding a job. You got to be able to hold a job down. You got to have, it's got to be purposeful. It just can't be job placement. So I hope that answers the question.
And no, it does. And I think the commonality that we both see is that you got to have that connection as a veteran with people, your community, your other veterans. When you do that transition, you need it throughout your career, you need it through life, but no one is successful on their own. Right? I mean, we all have been moderately successful in life because of spouses, of family members, of friends, of mentors along the way. But what's the common denominator there? Other people to help you kind of look things from a different perspective and help you through the way. And I just feel like there's so many veterans that get out, and I'd love to have a list like magically appear on my computer that of all the ones that are in this area where I live, so I could go out and have lunch with them, take them out to coffee, have them meet other people I know, take them to businesses I know, and help them get plugged in, because I think that would make such a difference for them. Because as we've already talked about, they're horrible about asking for help. But if you did it in a way that says, hey, I just want to introduce you to people, and this might be something you're interested in, boy, what a difference that would make.
Yeah, I think now, our veterans, it's a different problem set. So one of our ways for the future is we have to go find the veterans and warriors wherever they are. And it may not be in a very good place. And before, when we first started, you could go to the hospitals on the point of evacuation and find the warriors. We still do hospital visits. We still go all the time. We still connect in hospitals when warriors are injured or come ill to some part of due to their service. We still find them there. But many of them have gotten out. They transition somewhat successfully, and then they're out for a period of 4 or 5 years, and things start to unravel.
Right.
And we don't know where they are. And to me, this is the difference in this generation. And this is not just Wounded Warrior Project, but it's part of our vision for the future. Is we got to help every veteran for a lifetime, for the generation of the veteran. It's not enough. Like, take the greatest generation of World War II. It came back from war, great ticker tape parade, help people get to college, help people with low housing, finding free homes, get people back into work, great programs to get things started. But then, dad or grandpa never talked about the war for 60 years.
Yeah.
That's not a life.
No.
Just because you served and did honorable work for 2 or 4 or 5 years, whatever, doesn't mean you can't live the rest of your life to the most productive and fulfilling that should be, and how much love you have to give. I mean,
right.
The hardest part too often, the hardest part of surviving combat is living. And living with the guilt that you made it back and your friends didn't. Sometimes we see that's what happens to people when they start to spiral out of control.
Yep.
Is they start to look back and say, I could have done something else. Why am I here when my friends didn't make it back?
I should have done this. I should have done that.
And over time, and it's not, you don't wake up in the morning with a fever and say, okay, I got PTSD because I got guilt. It chips away over time. Normally, you may just be angry at a red light, or angry in traffic patterns, or angry at something you didn't know about before, or you start to withdraw, or you start to drink more or work out less. All these little things manifest over time. That it's not really recognizable in a moment in time, but over time, all these factors start to play, and you're like, wow, how did we not see, this guy struggling because, one, he didn't ask for help, or she didn't want help, and the family didn't know they didn't know where to go to get help. I met a gentleman last night who's a local businessman in Jacksonville, and he just said, my son is having trouble. My daughter also served. She's having trouble. She's getting help. I said, well, can I help them? Can we call them? And he goes, well, do you do that? I'm like, absolutely. They served our country. This is what we do. We honor their service. And your life shouldn't fall apart just because you serve your country.
Right. And hopefully those that are listening today, if you are having a challenge, or somebody, you'll go to Wounded Warrior Project's website, you come to Mission Roll Call's website, but reach out because that's our mission. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to do. We wake up every morning trying to make this world a little bit better through our veteran community. One thing I didn't know about you, Walt, that your staff shared with me, and I can't believe I didn't know this, that you wrote 2 books on poetry. And I'm sure you did that as a release, as to get your thoughts down on paper. But talk to me a little bit about that and how you used that and how that all came about. I'm very interested.
Yeah, well, I unofficially voted the most likely student ever to publish anything in writing from my high school class. If my English teacher would know that, she would be shocked, Mrs. Smith, but I credit her for pushing me. But I always wrote, and it always was a form of therapy for me, to write about the extraordinary things that I was seeing at the time I was seeing them. And then after 9/11, I deployed shortly after 9/11. I remember one of the first visions I had was we deployed. Literally, I had to leave. I had to be out in my driveway at 2 a.m. We were a small detachment heading over to a place we weren't allowed to say, but now we know is Uzbekistan and Karshi-Khanabad, our first air base to get into Afghanistan. But I remember leaving and I kissed the kids goodnight, kissed my wife goodnight. I snuck out of the house and I turned around and the van was pulling away. I saw my wife like outside, like standing there. And I remember thinking, am I ever going to see her again? But I also thought, man, it was like the most beautiful view I've ever seen. This was war coming to our little family, and a powerful testimony of her love for her soldier husband. But that happened everywhere to people all over. And I wanted to write about that. And I kept writing about what I was seeing and hearing in Afghanistan about first casualties. One of the first casualty reports I received was a friend of mine that I saw his name on a paper, and it just hit me like, wow, this is real. Wow. And little things, a soldier we had was blown up just trying to demine the area around Bagram that we were trying to build a base. I mean, and I remember the Afghans being so compassionate toward us. And one of the Afghan generals telling me, like, he came here to help free us. He shouldn't have lost his leg. And to see that compassion, and I just wanted to write about that because I knew people would write about the history and the military actions of war. I wanted to write about what I was seeing and feeling at that time because it was powerful for me. And I remember the moments, but I don't remember the verses. People say, oh, well, you recite one. I'm like, I don't know. I got rid of it. That's why I got rid of it. I wrote it down. And so it is very therapeutic for me to like, hey, if I saw something bad or I saw something, like a poor child with no food, it just tears your gut out as an American, because we grew up, even if you're poor in America, you still had it better than most of the children we were seeing. And
right.
It was not to compare, but it just would rip your heart out. And,
sure.
And as an American, we look at young children and animals and we're just so empathetic to the cause. So he just wrote about that. And I tried to capture what I was seeing and hearing in real time. I wrote on my first deployment, and it was actually, the title was She Came to the Door to Wave Goodbye. And the second one, I went back in 04, and wrote another one called Paktika. It was the year we were in Paktika province. And that one, I put more time and effort to tell short stories at each start of the chapter and included verse about, the Afghan people, military families, what it was doing for us. Like in that deployment, we were ready to take casualties. We went over there knowing for many of our warriors, it was the first time they'd been deployed. We knew it would be hard. We knew there'd be combat. We knew there'd be fatalities. But our first fatality was actually a military dependent child back at our barracks in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. And all the preparation, all the rehearsals we did for family notification and everything, we didn't know what to do. And it was a child I knew because our kids played sports together, and it was a tragic accident inside their home. And I had to tell the father at deployment that he just lost his son, and I didn't even know all the facts. And my wife and a young rear detachment officer, had to hold the family together while, the police had to do the investigation, which made everybody feel very guilty. It was just a set of circumstances, that you never expect. And also one lieutenant who was extraordinary young man, and most of them are, but he was a West Point graduate, athlete. You look at him, you think he's going to be president of the United States someday. Just had that appeal to him. And his first combat action, it was very decisive, but yet the outcome was very tragic. And they had mistakenly shot up a car filled with civilians, and many of them were women, and injured them very severely in the legs. And they did everything right, but the outcome was very wrong. And I remember sitting him down saying, welcome to combat, because it's not what you think. It's not what you see on TV. You did everything right, what you were trained to do, to protect your force, to accomplish your mission. Yeah. But the outcome was anything but. And for a young woman to have to live with that. Right. I had a warrior I wrote about. We sat on a building one night after a day. We were in a little firefight. We secured the area in the town, and I couldn't sleep. It was about 2 a.m. I walked around on guard duty, and I talked to him, and I ran into a sergeant who was one of our best sergeants on duty, and he was pulling guard duty so his soldiers could sleep, typical sergeant. Great leader. And he looked at me and he said, sir, you like these people, referring to the Afghan people. And before I could answer, he admitted to me that he didn't like them, that he was struggling because he was a Christian, but he was angry and he wanted to kill them, and he was feeling this, this tension. I think a lot of warriors feel. You see something happen to your buddies, and you dehumanize the people there, and then you start to think that everybody's to blame for this thing, and you can't see the complexity and the cruelty of all around you, and how unsensible it all is. But I remember thinking, I said, well, I actually take issues with some parts of the culture. I don't like the way they treat women. We're from a different society, but we didn't come here to like them or like us. We came here to stabilize and protect the innocent while ridding their country from this evil that attacked our country. And, and I said, in some ways we have to negotiate that, and we have to deal with the raw emotions of that. But he touched the nerve in me. It was the purpose of the poem, that maybe I wasn't strong enough to do what I came here to do, and that was take a life of another human being. Yeah. But I realized that's not really how we should measure the strength of our warriors. The warriors get placed in really difficult positions, have to make split-second decisions every day. Some of them turn out to save many lives. Some of them turn out to end a lot of lives. But they still have to live with that decision regardless of what they did. Yeah. So been very therapeutic for me. I still write today. I've got 2 books in the hopper that I may publish someday, but one of my last decade of military service, trying to explain about how compassion is a very powerful tool of our nation, and how I've seen compassion leveraged in time of conflict for great results. Right. Because I think everyone knows lethality, nobody's stronger than the U.S. military. But you can't win just by killing. You've got to build. And I think we know that through our history. What's made us such a great country is that we've always helped rebuild from the ashes of war, even from, sworn enemies. We help rebuild to different societies. It's what makes America so great, is we can kill with surgical lethality and precision, but we also know we have to protect and build and protect the innocent and stabilize people who are just victims of war and not necessarily the causes of that war.
Yeah. Well, I think your point of being able to write these thoughts down and almost compartmentalize your emotion on it, and that was your outlet of doing that. Everyone needs to have that to some extent in their life, especially those that have gone through some difficult times. And it's not too late to do that, right? I mean, even though you might have gotten out of the military 5 years ago, 20 years ago, and you're dealing with some issues, you need to find that outlet. And maybe it's an organization, maybe it's through writing, maybe it's through physical fitness, maybe it's a combination of all those things. But you need to find that. Otherwise, I think to your point, it's going to build, and it's going to be such a heavy load on your back that you eventually give up. And we see that, right? I mean, we know the homelessness numbers and the suicide numbers are still way too high for a great country like ours. And I know both our organizations are working hard to help the VA and help others kind of figure out the best way to do that. Walt, this has been fantastic. It's wonderful to connect again with you. We've stayed in touch as of late, and I hope we continue to have another call like this and go over some other things, because I could go on for another 2 hours on some of the things you've got going on. But before we let you go, and I know you're a busy man, tell me a little bit about how people can support Wounded Warrior Project, how they can get involved, what they need to know about it. How can they be helpful to you?
Yeah, I know we provided a number on our website, woundedwarriorproject.org, and a barcode that people can scan from this podcast and come in, and they can register to help, register to volunteer, or register to donate if they choose to do so. Every small donation is so impactful on our warriors to help bring them home, because we have so much more to do. We're building to be able to be around here for the next 30 years so we can take care of our young men and women who have fought for our nation and help keep us free for the rest of their life. And if you look at how many people have served in uniform since 9/11, it's been close to 4 million, depending on where you get your statistics. But to me, 1 in 3, we know from our data, 1 in 3 are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, traumatic brain injury, trauma caused by sexual assault, some other substance abuse issues. 1 in 3. So that's well over 1 million people. So we have 1 million lives to save. And with the suicide rate of 15 to 22 veterans each day, that's unacceptable. We have to find a cure, and I believe we can to PTSD. We got to end veteran suicide. We got to end veteran homelessness. We got to save 1 million lives. And the only way we can do it is by keeping the promise. Keep the promise to the men and women who help keep this nation free that we will be there for them no matter what.
Oh, thank you, Walt. And it's so great to hear you say end it. So many times I hear people reduce homelessness and reduce suicide. That's not what we're striving for.
We see it's part of our legislation with the Overpressure Act. Looking at this, it's not just war that causes brain injuries to our veterans. It's service. I mean, the weapons that you fire, the conditions you fire them under are causing serious injuries to many warriors by the amount of repetition. We need to know that. We want to train. We want the most lethal force, but we want it to also train it safely so you don't suffer from just training. But we see it all the time. In some instances, we're seeing cancer in some certain military specialties. We're seeing cancer in other certain military specialties. We got to follow the science and help keep our men and women safe during the course of their service and be there for them when they're impacted by that service.
Well, thank you, Walt. And thank you to Wounded Warrior Project and all that you're doing for many years. Cutting edge research, cutting edge facilities and support to families and veterans across this great country. I would urge everybody on the podcast to go to the website, share it with others, dive into what they're doing, see if there's a way you can get involved or refer somebody to it. We don't want to leave anybody behind. There's 18 million veterans in our country. Only half of them are associated with the VA or any VSO. So we have a addressable market of 50% growth that we need to reach. And we together need to do that. And it's important for us to make sure that we grip hands and come together on this and make sure that veterans are getting the help that they need and that their families are getting the support they need. Walt, thank you so much. God bless you and all the hard work you and Cynthia are doing. And thanks again for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And thanks for all you do. I greatly appreciate everything that you do in facilitating this to help our veterans and to help all our organizations, all veterans organizations, to help bring every warrior home, mind, body, and soul. Thank you for leading that effort.